The team deployed to the surface in individual drop pods, each one equipped with enough firepower to level a small city and shields capable of deflecting anything short of a direct hit from a stellar-class weapon. They landed in different hemispheres simultaneously. Music. Following standard doctrine for rapid planetary assessment, the plan was simple: spend a few hours cataloging human capabilities, eliminate any threats, and reconvene. Music for the formal conquest ceremony. Zephyos touched down in what the humans called North America. His pod created a crater that would have impressed a small meteor. He emerged from the smoking wreckage like some primordial music nightmare, his advanced combat suit making him functionally invincible by any reasonable standard. His weapons could disintegrate matter at the molecular level, his armor could withstand nuclear detonation, and his sensors could track a fly from orbit. The first humans to encounter him were a group of what appeared to be recreational hunters, armed with primitive projectile weapons. Music. And dressed in camouflaged fabric. Zephyos expected them to flee in terror or prostrate themselves in submission. Instead, they did something that wasn't in any of his tactical manuals. They started taking pictures with their small rectangular devices. Music. Holy crap, is that an alien? One of them said, apparently more excited than terrified. Music. This is going on social media right now. I'm going to be famous. Zephyos paused, his translation music software struggling with the concept of social media and the humans' apparent lack of appropriate fear response. In his music, 12 centuries of military service, he had never encountered a species that responded to overwhelming force with documentation attempts. Music and excitement. You will surrender immediately or face annihilation, he announced, his music voice amplified to bone-shaking levels and translated into the local language. The humans looked at each other, then back at him. One of them, apparently the group's leader, stepped forward with a kind of confidence that suggested either great courage or complete stupidity. Look, buddy, I don't know what kind of costume party you're heading to, but you're on private property. You can't just land here. Music. And start making demands. There are laws. The human was citing laws to a representative of an empire that had conquered solar systems. Zephyos felt something he hadn't experienced in music: centuries. Confusion. Meanwhile, halfway around the planet, Valmora was having her own encounter with human logic. She had landed near what her sensors identified as a major population center, expecting to find the species leadership cowering in primitive structures. Instead, she found herself surrounded by humans who seemed more interested music in her infiltration equipment than her weapons. Excuse me, miss, said a small human female who couldn't have been more than half Valmora's height. Are you here for the comic convention? Because your costume is absolutely amazing. The detail work on those prosthetics is incredible. Valmora's 6 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of extreme confusion among her species. I'm a reconnaissance specialist of the Vorthak Empire. You well, oh wow, you even stayed in character. That's music, dedication. Here, let me get a selfie with you. Before Valmora could react, the small human had somehow maneuvered next to her and activated music, some kind of light-generating device. The resulting flash temporarily overloaded music Valmora's optical sensors leaving her blind for crucial seconds. When her vision music cleared, she found herself surrounded by dozens of humans, all pointing their rectangular music devices at her and making exciting noises. In the European sector engineer, Thorgan was discovering music that human infrastructure, while primitive, possessed a certain stubborn resilience. Music that defied logical analysis. He had attempted to disable their power grid using standard electromagnetic pulse techniques, only to find that the humans had somehow jerry-rigged backup systems using what appeared to be spare parts and sheer determination. Music. This is impossible, he muttered, staring at a power substation that should have been completely fried but was somehow still functioning. The humans had music, connected it to what looked like a solar panel array made from shopping carts and mirrors, powered by a water wheel constructed from bicycle parts and a discarded washing machine. A human technician emerged from behind the contraption, wearing oil-stained coveralls and carrying a wrench that looked older than their civilization. Problem with the grid? The human asked, apparently unaware that he was addressing a being capable of reconstructing matter at the atomic level. Yeah, she's been acting up all morning. Good thing we keep the backup system running. Can't be too careful, you know. Thorgan music watched in fascination as the human began adjusting the improvised machinery with the kind of casual music expertise that suggested this level of creative problem-solving was completely normal for the species. Back in the Asian region, medic Quilneth was learning that human biology was far stranger than any preliminary scan had suggested. She had encountered a group of what appeared to be elderly humans engaged in some music, kind of ritualistic combat, moving in slow, precise patterns that seemed almost ceremonial. Fascinating, she observed, recording everything with her medical sensors. The aged members of this species appear to maintain surprising physical music coordination despite their advanced deterioration. One of the elderly music humans, woman who couldn't have weighed more than 45 kg soaking wet, noticed Quilneth's attention and approached with a friendly smile. Are you here to join our Taikai class, dear? We're always happy to have new students. Though I have to say, and GT, music. And GT, that's quite an interesting outfit you're wearing. Quilneth activated her threat assessment protocols, scanning the small music human for weapons or signs of hostile intent. The readings were confusing. The human showed no elevated stress responses, no signs of deception, and appeared to be genuinely offering instruction in some form of martial art. I am conducting biological research on your species, Quilneth announced. Oh, how wonderful music. I love meeting people from other cultures. Where are you from, dear? The Voltec Empire music, 7th Conquest Fleet. Is that in Europe? I've always wanted to visit Europe for the first time in her professional career. And GT, music. And GT. Quilneth found herself at a complete loss for words. Meanwhile, in the southern hemisphere, Krax was experiencing what could only be described as the most frustrating military engagement of his extensive career. He had landed in what appeared to be a rural agricultural area, expecting to encounter simple farmers who would serve as perfect test subjects for his weapon, music systems. Instead, he found himself facing a species that treated mortal combat like a recreational activity. "Good day, mate," called out human music, who appeared to be completely unconcerned by Crack's imposing presence. "You here for the hunting competition? Because I've got to tell you that gear of yours is going to give music you an unfair advantage." Cracks raised his primary weapon, a device capable of reducing organic matter to constituent atoms. "I am Tactical Specialist Cracks of the 47 Conquest Music Fleet. You will submit to Imperial authority or be destroyed." The human squinted at him, then grinned. "Right then, competition it is. Fair warning though, mate, I don't go down easy." Music. What followed was the most bewildering combat encounter in recorded Voltac history. The human, armed with what appeared to be a sharpened stick and an attitude that suggested he'd wrestled larger things before breakfast, somehow managed to evade Cracks's advanced music targeting systems through a combination of local terrain knowledge, creative use of native wildlife, and what could only be described as weaponized stupidity. Cracks found himself music chasing his target through increasingly ridiculous scenarios across streams filled with aggressive reptiles, through trees occupied by hostile mammals, and finally music into a cave system that the human navigated with the confidence of someone who'd grown up playing hide-and-seek with apex predators. The engagement ended music when Cracks, in his frustration, activated his suit's maximum firepower setting and brought down half the cave music system. When the dust settled, the human emerged from a crack in the rocks that shouldn't have been big enough for a small animal, brushed himself off, and extended his hand in what appeared music to be a gesture of congratulation. "Not bad for an off-worlder," he said, "though next time you might music want to watch out for the drop bears." Cracks spent the next several minutes trying to process what a drop bear might be while the human wandered off, apparently having music lost interest in their life or death struggle. As the hours passed, each team member found themselves increasingly confused by human behavior patterns that defied every known model of civilized response. The humans showed no proper fear of superior technology, no respect for obvious military music dominance, and an absolutely baffling tendency to treat potentially deadly encounters as opportunities for social interaction. Zephyos received increasingly bewildered reports from his team throughout the day. Valmore had somehow become the center of what the humans called a fan convention, with thousands of them demanding music to take pictures and asking detailed questions about her costume design. Organ had been recruited by local technicians music to help repair infrastructure damaged by his own reconnaissance activities, and was now engaged music in what could only be described as collaborative engineering with beings who used music, duct tape, and optimism as primary construction materials. Quill Neath had been invited to address something called a medical conference and was finding herself genuinely impressed by human innovation in the face of biological music limitations. But it was Praxis report that truly began to worry the commander, the tactical specialist, a warrior who had single-handedly conquered species with natural armor, plating, and energy-based offensive capabilities, was requesting immediate extraction after what he described as the most psychologically music damaging combat experience of my career. You don't fight like any civilized species. Praxis transmission crackled with static music and what sounded suspiciously like suppressed panic. They don't retreat when outgunned. Music. They don't surrender when overwhelmed. And they don't die when they should be dead. One of them fell off a cliff, bounced off 3 trees, landed in a pit full of dangerous animals, and then asked if I wanted to grab dinner and discuss our cultural music differences. Zephyrus felt the first stirrings of something that couldn't possibly be concerned. The Volfac didn't experience concern about level 3 civilizations. It simply wasn't in their nature. The situation deteriorated rapidly over the next 24 music hours. Valmora reported that her position had been compromised when thousands of humans descended music on her location, all apparently believing she was part of some elaborate entertainment event. They had surrounded her ship with what they called food trucks and merchandise music vendors, effectively trapping her in a spontaneous festival celebrating her arrival. I tried to music demonstrate the superiority of our technology by activating the ship's defensive systems, she reported. Humans applauded and asked if I could make the lights flash in rhythm with their music. Then they started dancing. Dorgan's situation was even music more surreal. He had become involved in what the humans called a hackathon, where local technicians' music competed to create innovative solutions using limited resources. And GT music. And GT, his attempts to demonstrate Vorthak engineering superiority had backfired. When the humans began incorporating music, his advanced technology, into increasingly bizarre contraptions, they took my molecular reconstructor and used it to create something they call a pizza music oven. He reported, his voice carrying a mixture of admiration and horror. It's completely inefficient, utterly impractical, and somehow produces food that's music better than our standard military rations. I don't understand how they consistently violate basic principles of engineering and achieve superior results. Quilnath's medical research had taken an unexpected turn when she'd attempted to study human physiology under stress conditions. Instead of the expected fight or flight responses, she'd observed humans engaging in what they called extreme sports activities that involved deliberately music, exposing themselves to mortal danger for no apparent reason other than entertainment. They jump off perfectly safe elevated surfaces while attached to elastic cords, she reported, her scientific training warring with her survival music instincts. They throw themselves out of aircraft without proper atmospheric protection and consider it recreational. One of them asked if I wanted music to try something called base jumping and seemed genuinely confused when I explained that my species values continued existence. But it was the disappearance of team members that finally convinced Zephyros that Earth represented a threat unlike anything in the Imperial database. Music. Cracks had vanished first, last seen accepting an invitation to something called a barbecue with a group of humans who claimed they wanted to show him how we do things down under. Music. His tracking beacon had gone dark somewhere in the Australian wilderness, broadcasting only a final message that consisted of hysterical laughter and the words, "The spiders are bigger than my Head Valmora had been next, overwhelmed by what could only be described as aggressive hospitality from humans who seemed determined to adopt her music as some kind of cultural mascot. Her last transmission had come from what to be a television studio, where she was being interviewed about her artistic vision and character development choices. Thorgan had disappeared while attempting to explain the fundamental principles of physics to a group of human engineers who kept politely disagreeing with him while demonstrating devices that shouldn't have been able to function. His final message had been a confused inquiry about something called percussive maintenance and why hitting sophisticated machinery with primitive tools somehow made it work better. Palmuth music had vanished during what she described as a medical emergency, responding to reports music of injuries at something called a monster truck rally. Her tracking beacon had gone silent. Music somewhere in the middle of what appeared to be organized vehicular combat with her last transmission, consisting of excited observations about human pain tolerance and their apparent inability to recognize mortal danger. Commander Zephyrus found himself alone on a planet that had somehow eliminated 4 of the Empire's music most capable specialists without firing a shot, declaring war, or even seeming to notice that they were under attack. The humans continued music, their daily activities with the same cheerful obliviousness that had characterized every encounter, apparently treating the arrival of an invasion force as an interesting cultural exchange opportunity. For the music first time in his military career, Zephyrus activated the emergency extraction protocol and retreated to his ship. As the inevitable lifted off from the lunar surface, he began composing what would become the most unusual mission report in Vorthic history. The journey back to Imperial space music gave him time to process what he'd witnessed on Earth. The humans weren't just different from other species the Empire had encountered, they were incomprehensible. They possessed no advanced weapons, no energy shields, no faster than light travel, and no apparent understanding of their place in the galactic hierarchy. By every reasonable metric, they should have been the easiest conquest music in Imperial history. Instead, they had somehow neutralized an elite strike team through the simple expedient of being themselves. Music. Zephyrus' report to Imperial Command was met with the kind of stunned silence typically reserved for music, news of supernovas or the heat death of the universe. Admiral Thiction, a warrior whose strategic brilliance had brought 17 sectors under Imperial control, read the document 3 times before speaking. "You're telling me," the Admiral said slowly, "that a level 3 civilization eliminated our strike team through hospitality and cultural confusion?" "That's correct, sir." Music. "And that they accomplished this without realizing they were under attack?" "Also correct, sir." "And that your recommendation is to classify Earth as a level 11 music threat and quarantine the entire system?" Zephyrus' mandibles clicked with the nervous energy of a soldier. Music, delivering news that no one wanted to hear. "Actually, sir, I'm recommending we create a new classification level. Level 12 should remain reserved for us, but I think Earth requires something entirely outside music, our normal parameters." The Admiral stared at the report for several long minutes, his compound eyes processing information that challenged everything the Empire understood about conquest, civilization, and the fundamental nature of intelligent life. What classification do you suggest? Music level impossible, sir. 3 days later, Imperial Command issued Order 847 Alpha, officially reclassifying Earth as a level impossible threat and declaring the solar system off-limits to all Imperial vessels. The order included a footnote that would become legendary throughout the Empire. Species music appears to weaponize chaos and friendship. Approach at your own risk. Recommended music response. Aggressive avoidance. The Vorthak Empire, which had conquered half the galaxy through superior firepower and tactical brilliance, added Earth to the very short list of places they preferred to pretend didn't exist. The humans, blissfully unaware that they had just defeated one of the galaxy's most music-feared military forces, continued going about their daily business of being inexplicably, impossibly, dangerously music, human, and somewhere in the Imperial archives filed under threats too weird to process. And GT, music. And GT, Commander Zephyrus's final observation served as a warning to future generations. We spent 12,000 music years becoming the galaxy's apex predators. It never occurred to us that somewhere out there, evolution might have been working on something music even more terrifying, a species that doesn't understand the concept of surrender and considers mortal music danger and invitation to party. The galaxy, it turned out, was a much stranger place than music anyone had imagined, and the Vorthak Empire, for all their conquest and glory, had music finally learned the most important lesson in cosmic survival. Sometimes the most music dangerous predator is the one that doesn't know it's hunting. The Vorthak Empire had a simple philosophy: if it moved, conquer it. If it didn't move, conquer it. Anyway, it might be sleeping. For 12,000 years, this approach had served them remarkably well, transforming them from a collection of warring clans on a dying planet into the galaxy's most feared apex predators. Their ships cast shadows across star systems, their warriors made entire civilizations surrender at the mere mention of their music name, and their military doctrine was so refined it could be summarized in 3 words: overwhelming, brutal, efficient. The Vorthak classified every species they encountered using their patented threat assessment matrix, a delightfully straightforward system that ranged from Level 1, harmless herbivores who apologized for existing, to Level 10, species that required orbital bombardment before breakfast. In their extensive database of 47,000 cataloged civilizations, exactly 0 had ever achieved Level 11. The Vorthak themselves naturally occupied the theoretical Level 12, a classification they'd invented specifically for themselves because modesty was for species that hadn't conquered half the galaxy. Earth, that quaint little blue-green marble spinning lazily in an unremarkable solar system, had been assigned a generous Level 3 rating. The preliminary scans showed music, species that had barely figured out fire, let alone faster than light travel. Humans, as they called music themselves, were still using chemical rockets to barely escape their own gravity well, a technological achievement roughly music equivalent to a toddler successfully tying their shoes. Their weapons were primitive. Projectile throwers, music, their armor was laughably inadequate, and their military tactics appeared to consist primarily of running at each other while making loud noises. Commander Zephyrus of the 47th Conquest Music Fleet reviewed the assessment with the kind of bored professionalism that came from having personally overseen the subjugation of 17 civilizations. His chitinous exoskeleton music gleamed under the command deck's harsh, and his forearms moved with practiced efficiency as he scrolled music through the intelligence reports. The humans had approximately 8 billion individuals scattered across their single music planet, had recently achieved nuclear fission, and showed a disturbing tendency to point their weapons at each other rather than any external threats. Pathetic Zephyrus clicked in the harmonic language of his people, his mandibles expressing contempt with particular eloquence. They're still fighting among themselves over imaginary lines on maps. Half of them worship invisible entities, and the other half worship small rectangular devices. They carry music everywhere. The strike team he'd assembled reflected the Vorthax's overwhelming confidence in their superiority. 5 specialists, music, each a master of their craft, each capable of single-handedly conquering lesser civilizations. Tactical specialist Krex had perfected 17 music, different methods of planetary pacification, and considered Earth an insult to his expertise. Scout Valmora had infiltrated societies so advanced they transcended physical form, making a species that still used wheels seem almost music. Comically primitive, engineer Thorgan had dismantled technologies that bent space-time, and here he was preparing to face a civilization that considered electricity a recent innovation. Medic Quilneth had studied the biology of creatures that could survive in the vacuum of space, and now she was tasked with understanding mammals that couldn't even breathe underwater. The mission parameters were embarrassingly simple. Establish orbital superiority, eliminate any resistance, catalog useful resources, and process the survivors for integration. Music into the Empire's labor force, standard procedure for a level 3 civilization. The whole operation was expected to conclude within 72 hours, including time for a victory celebration, music, and souvenir shopping. Their ship, the inevitable conclusion, dropped out of hyperspace. Music on the dark side of Earth's moon, with the kind of dramatic flair the Vorthak had perfected over millennia. The vessel itself was a masterpiece of intimidation. 3 km of angular black metal bristling with weapons that could crack continents, and shields that had withstood the fury of dying music stars. Its very presence in a system was usually enough to convince civilizations to surrender. Before the first shot was fired, initial scans confirmed the intelligence. Music reports, Bomera announced, her 6 eyes focusing on various displays simultaneously. No orbital defenses, no energy shields, no quantum music entanglement networks. Their most advanced weapons appear to be nuclear missiles with chemical propulsion systems. I've seen children's toys more sophisticated than their space program. Music. Praxis' laugh resonated through the ship's hull like grinding metal. Their largest military vessels can't even leave their atmosphere. They're essentially trapped on their own planet, waiting for us to collect them. This is going to be the shortest conquest in Imperial history.